College Redditors, what's the stupidest comment a classmate has ever made during a lecture and pissed off the professor? I had one of those let's push boundaries, advanced writing professors in college that everyone had to eventually take to graduate. I thought he was cool, he was unconventional, a little out there, and definitely exposed me to things and arguments my young mind wouldn't have sought out on my own. Anyway, one day he wanted us to calmly sit and ponder out a question, and he liked to do a small chime to relax us. He did this 3 times, and this one girl in class just flipped out saying she didn't believe in some Asian religious BS. He wasn't even Asian, and said she'd call her dad to yell at him. The professor just walked to the door and opened it. He said he didn't have room in his class for close-minded airheads who can't even tolerate things outside their comfort zone. This is the most college moment in this thread. That professor's name? Albert Einstein. He's wicked smart. During a lecture on the history of the civil rights movement and segregation in South Carolina, a student asked something to the effect of, "Why do we have to listen to this liberal nonsense?" The kid seemed to believe that racial segregation never happened in the South, and that Democrats made the whole thing up. The professor was on the staff of the governor that pushed for integration, and the guest speaker was a civil rights leader who had been beaten and arrested during the sit-ins. I got an eraser thrown at me by trying to answer a question in a computer programming class that I had no business being in. I signed up for basic programming, thinking it would be an intro thing to computers, not realizing that basic was a programming language. In a sociology class my freshman year, and the professor is explaining how societies create the standard of homosexuality and how it is arbitrary. That one culture thinks kissing men is homosexual while another could view it simply as a greeting. This one kid could not wrap his head around the fact that kissing another man on the cheek was not gay. 15-minute argument ensues and this kid is obviously going nowhere quick, so finally the professor breaks down and screams, "Professor, is it gay to give a hand job?" Student, "Hell yeah, are you ducking stupid?" Professor, "Do you masturbate?" Silence. Student, "Well duck yeah." Professor, "So then you're gay because you give hand jobs." The student becomes so dumbfounded by this petty logic that he just remains silent, doesn't say shit for at least 2 more weeks. I think this kid literally began to question if he was homosexual. Black people should have their own league of sports, because they are genetically faster/stronger because only the fast strong slaves survived. Sociology 101. The black professor actually stepped outside for a minute before returning and calmly telling her why she was completely wrong. Biology teacher asked about the communication techniques of ants. He wanted to know how we thought they communicated the location of a sugar cube to the hive and recruited ants to help carry it. Student raises his hand and says he just goes back to the ant hill and says, "Hey, it's over here," and they go get it. Teacher responds, says how? Student, "With words." Teacher, "What language do they speak?" Student, "English." Teacher, "So the ant speaks English? What does an ant in Mexico speak then?" Student, 100% serious, "English. It's the language of business." In Spanish class we were learning the difference between conocer, to be familiar with, and saber, to know as a fact. The professor used the example of the city of Boston. You would conocer the city of Boston. You would be familiar with it. You couldn't saber the city of Boston because you would have to know every inch of the city, to know it as a fact. That can't be done. Matt then said aloud in his perfect Boston accent, "Dead serious, Albert Einstein could. He's wicked smart." Let me paint the picture. Anthropology class, freshman year of college. Felt very much like Community and I loved it. There were some ducking characters in this class, let me tell you. One girl, we called her Melanoma, had an insane orange skin and would try to tell us about how tanning booths made you stronger. Science? There was then the whisperer, who would speak like she had finally convinced a cranky baby to fall asleep, and if she woke him up her day would be ruined. Snakeskin, wore knee-high cowboy boots and collected swords and talked about the swords more often than anyone was comfortable with. But my favorite classmate was called Leaded Spoons. Leaded Spoons was your typical white guy with dreads at college. We didn't know at the time, but he had failed several semesters. This was his 3rd or 4th junior year. That didn't bother him, he was just living. This was a kind of preppy southern school, so he definitely stuck out as an oddball, but everyone liked him and he had lots of entertaining stories about taking LSD to share with the class, so we were happy to have him among our group of budding anthropologists. One day we were discussing a case study where all of the children in a town were found to have lead poisoning. We had to use our anthropological reasoning skills, that is, we had to guess, to deduce how they were poisoned. We talked a lot about water quality, the local school grounds, jungle gyms in the park. It was actually a surprisingly intelligent conversation for a bunch of ducking idiots. I include myself in that bunch. You could see Leaded Spoons had some gears turned. He was twisting his dreads, his brow furrowed, quickly scribbling notes. Suddenly, his hand shot up. The teacher, surprised he would really have anything to add to the discussion, called on him. He stood up next to his desk, right at the front of the lecture halls, and said they were eating off of leaded spoons. He had charts and graphs explaining his conspiracy theory, and this baby went all the way to the top, right up to the President of the goddamn United States of America. After he was finished, the teacher said, yeah, I guess that's also possible. Anyone else have an idea? I heard a rumor that when he finally graduated he cut off one of his dreads and gave it to a girl he liked, but that is unconfirmed. Typical hippie chick on the first day. Is this class going to cover non-Western contributions to history? The class was History of Western Civilization. It wasn't in college, but in middle school, we had this really not very bright girl in our class. I forgot which class it was, but in the book it was talking about some famous Dutch painter, I think, and she blurts out, "Mrs. Schultz? Where exactly is Duck?" Needless to say, Mrs. Schultz was confused, as was everyone in the room. We couldn't figure out what she meant, but she couldn't make it any clearer than that. She could only respond to our confusion by repeating herself with this confused look on her face. Finally, she goes, "Where is Duck? Like where on the map?" And it suddenly struck me what she meant. I couldn't help myself. I just burst out laughing my ass off. I mean, I sincerely tried not to laugh, but it just came out. Like I was involuntarily vomiting laughter out of my face. Apparently, she thought that Dutch people come from a country called Duck. Her justification was, well, there's a country called Turkey, so why can't there be one called Duck? I got in trouble for laughing at her. Edit, I'm dumb. It would have had to have been English class if it was Mrs. Schultz. I laughed reading this, so I don't blame you. I kept picturing her posing it as a philosophical question. Where is Duck? Are we all Duck? Am I Duck? Why didn't the Egyptians just go to Africa and get some slaves to build the pyramids instead of making their own people do it? Wow, that's like 3 levels of hilarious. In biology, discussing plant genetics. Mr. Chamberlain, could I turn into a tornado? Maybe more of a head scratch than getting pissed, but I could see the look of disgust, confusion, and annoyance written on his face. What the duck? I was in an intro to music course. We always had a bro type that would fall asleep during class, and the professor would always call on him to answer questions. My favorite was, "Where was Mozart born?" To which the bro woke up and replied, "Michigan." I am willing to bet there is at least one person in Detroit with the name Mozart. Probably drops mad beats too. He got 99 problems, but his pitch ain't one. I just don't think the cloud is safe. What if the weather is bad and you can't access your data? Also of special note is the hipster who started bringing a typewriter to class to take notes. Psychology professor lecturing about how placebo pills work. Girl, yeah, is that like in Space Jam where Michael Jordan gives them the sugar water and they like feel better? Professor, sigh, yeah, I guess it's kind of like that. I've always laughed at this, but to her credit it's a perfect example. Are cows counted in part of the population? A girl in my history class asked this last year. Completely serious. Our teacher looked like he was in pain after hearing it. Professor, today, just do all the even numbers. Student, just to clarify, those are 2, 4, 6, and 8, right? The professor left. A helpful student said yes. Those are the even numbers. How do dogs in other countries function when their owners say things like pelota instead of ball? Like how do they know what a ball is when the owner talks Spanish? So weird. What the duck? When discussing overfishing, a stereotypical vegan said, "Why doesn't everyone just, like, stop eating fish? It's all over folks, pack it up, problem ducking solved."